Thank you for clicking on the video, and thanks to HYPR for sending this controller for review. Maybe you're not familiar with the custom PS5 world of controllers, and this is what we have here today. So we'll unpack it, see what kind of design I made, but there's a lot more that happens under the hood, and we'll talk about all the different options, how you could get one for your own if you're interested, and what the benefits are of going with such an option. Hi, I'm Clive, and you're watching GameTechTalk. Now, although they did send it, that has no impact on my opinions and no money changed hands. Let's have a look at the controller I had made custom. No fluff, very simple. Once we open it, you're met with welcome to performance, and performant it is indeed. In the box, we have the controller itself in all its glory. We'll look at it in a second. And under it, we have interchangeable stick caps. That's not guaranteed, that will depend on the options. And for all intents and purposes, this is a DualSense controller. Depending on the way that you build it, you can have your haptic feedback, you can have your adaptive triggers, the buttons feel the same, it even responds as a DualSense controller. So there is zero risks of this controller not being recognized by the PS5. It will work guaranteed because it is built on top of a DualSense. But then you can make it pretty unique. I went with the silver buttons. I went with also slightly glossy gray trim, as well as the touchpad. I went for a clear white stick that is interchangeable. That's why I got the options. White shoulder buttons, white function buttons, and then in the back, 4 paddles, as well as this pro grip. I wanted this to be my pro immersive controller. This is what I use to like enjoy with an experience like say Astrobot, something that still gives me better features and better options. Before we go deeper into how it feels, let's talk about how I built this controller. They specialize in PS5, PS4, and Xbox. You can start off with different options depending on what you want, a PS5, PS4, or Xbox. In this specific scenario, we're looking at PS5, so we'll customize the signature. When you're in the customization part, you can do just color, or you can do color and performance. And performance unlocks a lot of different things that you can do through your controller to make it that much better. You can have either mechanical buttons in the back that you can reroute to other buttons, or you can have the Flex Pro where you have 4 different buttons, and the remap chip will allow you to remap them yourself, which I strongly recommend, and I'll show you how it's done. It's super easy, but if you don't want to do that, you can just tell them what you want, which button to do what in terms of value. And by the way, even though it says triggers and bumpers don't work, in my testings it did, but indeed touchpad, PS button sharing options do not. Then there's also the bumpers and triggers. I like adaptive because I like immersiveness in my games, but if you don't care for the special features of the DualSense triggers, going with quick will give you a button that is so responsive, so fast to actuate. It's an extremely short distance tactile button, which is great for competitive gaming, shooters, Fortnite, these types of games. Most important thing is going to be your stick module, and I'll go a little more in depth in terms of the differences later in this video. For now, what I wanted to show you is if you go to standard, you have a couple of tuning options that you can pick. If you go Hall effect, you also have a couple of options, and if you go TMR, you have different makes from different companies that you can pick. And I strongly recommend TMR because they feel like a traditional stick, but they have a lot of benefits over them. And we'll address that later, but for the time being, I wanted to talk a little bit about the 4 different brands that they have here: Ginfull, K-Silver, GoalieKit, and ALPS. I'm familiar with K-Silver and GoalieKit. I never tried ALPS, but based off of the description, I understand it as it's a GoalieKit, maybe a little cheaper just based off of the price, or maybe it's exactly the same. Ultimately, I already know GoalieKit, so I didn't go with this one. I went with Ginfull, funny enough, because I asked their recommendation and I had never heard of this brand before, and I was curious to test it, and at a later time in a completely different video we'll talk again about the GoalieKit, but for now I went with Ginfull, and I'll tell you more during my stick testing portion of this video. And then you have a bunch of different colors. We won't go over each options, but for the most part you can just like edit your front plate, your trim, your home buttons, your touchpad. You can change the caps, that's probably important. PS5 is the stock one. Pro is a little different, especially on the edges. You have rings rather than having like a little dotted grip. You have interchangeable ones, and then you have DS Edge, which if you're familiar with old school PS controllers, that's basically the type of stick that you have in there. If you prefer, you can change your colors, you can change the color of the ring, the D-pad, the buttons, the color of the bumpers, triggers, rear, everything. Very important, rumble. By default, they will remove rumble because in a competitive scene, a lot of people don't want to have the rumble motors. If you don't care for it, then you want to have it remove it, shed some weight, and vibration can affect your shot in a dire kind of situation. Now, personally, I'd rather have it. If you want it, you just leave it on. Warranty, express shipping, all the good stuff. Once you're done, you'll see the price and then you can add to cart if that's good. But you can also come back to it and you can also save your design. That's what I did. I saved my design and I was able to further then take the URL and send it to the companies so that they know how I wanted my controller made. Oh, and by the way, you can also look the pictures of the different angles of the controller you make. It's a really nice tool. Now that we're done, let's go back to talking about the controller. Another thing very cool is they sent a whole video showing the different testings of the controllers to make sure that what they shipped was exactly to my liking. It's a very premium service with a premium experience. As we mentioned during the building part, I have the Ginfull modules. We'll address that even further in the stick test. I want to talk a little bit about TMR versus Hall effect versus ALPS because that can get confusing. On a stock DualSense controller, what you have is ALPS, potentiometers. And they have been for the longest time what we've been using in most consoles, most handhelds. And chances are that you don't even feel as much a difference because you're so used to that system. And truth is, they still have very good benefits to this day, especially the linearity of your sticks and just the reliability, not over time, but especially when new. The problem with ALPS, as we all know, is eventually they drift, the module tends to get loose. The deterioration is felt very rapidly over time. While Hall effect, one of the greatest benefits is the deterioration is a lot more reliable. It's not so much what will happen over time, but rather what happens from day one. Sometimes you get a little bit of jitter on your reading. So you might push your stick just a little bit and it goes way past what you would have expected your stick to do. And that's often the sensor just having a misread, which happens in a split of a second. But during a gunfight, you don't want that split of a second to happen. So Hall effect for a lot of different games, if we're talking like say fighting games, if you're playing with your sticks, platformers, third-person action that does not require shooting, oftentimes it's going to be more than fine. But if you're playing a lot of FPS or games that require very precise usage, especially of your right stick, Hall effect, while good, has some caveat versus ALPS. And that's where TMR, which is what I have with the Ginfull, is for sure the better option because it kind of merges both worlds. You have the non-drift habit of Hall effect. You have higher quality sensor, which will allow for more minute little movements, all while retaining a sensation that is very much like ALPS in terms of just the reliability of your sensors. And so you won't get those jitters that you find in Hall effect. If you have an option and you are serious and especially competitive into your gaming, I would strongly recommend that you go for TMR and nothing else. There are 4 different options. And the Ginfull specifically is quite unique in its approach. Usually when talking about these modules, you have what are 2 elastics being crossed and holding your stick in the middle, and this is what brings back your stick to its center point. And in most case scenarios, your tension, which is the resistance of your sticks, your tension is loose at the center point and tighter at the end point of your circle. Pretty much a behavior of what you would expect an elastic to do. The more you stretch it, the tighter it becomes. Well, what I noticed with Ginfull, which caught me off guard, is that it's kind of the opposite. It's tighter in the middle and it is looser on the edges. And I have never seen sticks like that. So my advice to you is if you are looking for something that will train you, especially in tighter movement, and something that you may have a bit of a learning curve, Ginfull are extremely interesting. But it will develop different skills as well, especially in the tighter portion of your sticks. Whereas if you want something that has a behavior that is more like what you would expect, for the most part, the other 3 options will give you that sensation. Looser in the middle, tighter near the edges. So it kind of makes the center point of your sticks feel floaty. Anyways, we'll talk a little more during the stick portion. All in all, I wanted to cover this aspect. It's pretty unique. Now, another thing that I want us to cover is the remapping chip that I've mentioned. You don't have to get that. You can get them pre-built. Personally, I think the remapping chip is a must-have. If you're gonna go for back buttons, you want to have them. So let me show you how to do this very simple process. Once you're plugged into a device, be it a PC, a PS5, a phone, doesn't really matter. What you wanna do is hold what is the equivalent of your home button right here for approximately 2 seconds, and you'll notice the left LED to turn a different color. Kind of a pinkish, purple-ish color. So what you want to do is you want to hold the button that you're trying to pair and then hit the paddle that you're trying to pair it with. And if the pairing is not what is already in place, it will blink. So you see that purple-ish LED there, it'll blink. So let me show you what it looks like. All right, let's say I want to hold R2 and then I'm gonna push the top right paddle. And you see how it blinked just now? That means that it is recorded. Now, the pleasant thing here is that you can keep doing your other paddles before you get out of the configuration mode. If I wanna, for example, map my circle to my bottom right paddle, so I'm gonna hit circle, I'm gonna hit my bottom right paddle, and now you see how it blinked? And now it means that it's saved. So if I just hold this for 2 seconds, the purple LED just went away, and now my top right paddle does R2 and my bottom right paddle does circle. This is so easy to do. You can do multiple tweakings on the fly very easily. Not having the remap chip means that you will be stuck forever on whatever mappings that you asked of them. I will say this many times over that I've been using back paddles. I initially thought, oh, you know what, that move is gonna be good on that button, and I ultimately ended up changing my approach. Even if you're a one game person, I would strongly recommend to get the remap chip. The other thing that is cool when remapping is, let's say I want to go into mapping and I want to map L2 to my top right, top left, bottom left. You can do that. And then I save it. All my buttons in the back will always do my R2 key. And that's what I consider to be mirroring. And it's one thing I noticed over time using paddles is such a great tool to have. Sometimes it's not about having all those different buttons on your paddles. It's just having all your paddles be that reflex option that you have that you absolutely want to be able to achieve no matter what you do. That's another way that the remap chip is going to be extremely useful to have over time. So now let's go over my stick testing and the results that I got using the Ginfull. My first run clocked at 27,000 and my second at 34,000. And that's what I mean by learning curve. The Ginfull stick is pretty interesting and one I'm so happy I chose. And yes, I would have had more consistent results with the other options, but this one I know will ultimately help me train to get better. Now, this may not be your goal and that's okay if it isn't, but just know that the Ginfull has a learning curve. That's really what I'm trying to imply here. In my second run, you'll notice that I positioned my hand differently just to give me a little more stability and to control it. But one thing for sure, and something I don't use a whole lot of, this is another thing I'm very happy to have picked, is the interchangeable sticks, because they have 3 different heights, which I'll put them on screen so that you know the difference. And one thing for sure, Ginfull is going to work that much better with the taller sticks because you want to have as much control in your center point, but by having a higher tension, it's also preventing more movement than what you want it to be. It's kind of like what a lot of FPS players do with the mouse on PC, where you lower your sensitivity, but you increase your DPI. It's kind of the same feel, but with the stick. Now, another thing that I want to address, although it's not necessarily sticks, is the back paddles. I tried them in claw method, and keep in mind that the Flex Pro, they do require a bit of force to actuate, so it might shift your precision when you have to click those buttons. Something to keep in mind. They're very nice to use, but they do require a fair amount of pressure to actuate, which is great to prevent accidental push, but it's also requiring more effort when you do want to push them. All in all, I think the Ginfull will also be extremely interesting for claw grippers. I can already see how that would be a benefit because the claw grip gives you a little more control over the tightness of your sticks. So with something like a Control Freak or by just using the interchangeable option, I'm able to change to the high riser and just overall have a better feel and a better control. Lastly, I tested the sticks in Gamepad Tester. Everything was good. The slight jitter you see at the center point is absolutely normal. This is a correcting algorithm that is just doing what it's supposed to do. It does not reflect in games. Also keep in mind that on consoles of all places, you do not want to have a 0.0 accuracy because a lot of those games will still register past the circle. So I'm very happy with the reading that we have here. It's a great TMR stick. Super excited to use it more in the future. All right, let's move to the rest of this video. And so when it comes to everything else with this controller, it has the 3.5mm jack, regular membrane buttons. That is gonna depend on your options. All the haptic features, which also you can have removed as we addressed. One thing in particular that I wanted to show you guys is if it can be used with the official dock. And the straight up answer is no. Not if you have these back paddles, these 4 back paddles, it will not fit the official dock. But if you get those 2 buttons instead, it will. So it all comes down to the configuration. If for you, it's important to be able to dock it. And again, on the official dock, you don't have enough room in the way that this is designed to do it. However, Extreme Rate sells these little add-ons that you can put on top of your official dock, and these are designed to work with the Rise 4 back paddle. And if you buy one of these, you can add it to your official dock and you can dock your controller and have contact with it. So if this is something, a feature that you would like to retain, just know that yes, there is a way to do it. You have to get that little attachment right here, and I'll put a link in the description in case you want to get one for your own. Of course, that will work with the official dock. That will not work with every third-party docks. Now, when it comes to prices, it'll be anywhere between $130 to $290, depending on how you build it. Most important question would be, is it worth it? Absolutely. Especially if you are a competitive player that grinds through controllers before you can even realize. TMR or Hall Effect sticks will completely alleviate that issue for you. So while yes, the upfront cost is more expensive, over time you will never pay as much as you would have if you just buy first-party controllers. And on top of just having something that is longer lasting, you also have something that is more feature rich. Like for example, I didn't really talk a whole lot about it, but the Pro Grip feels so nice. It has this nice sensory feel that is not too overwhelming, not too obnoxious. So if you're quite sensitive to a sensory rugged texture, this is not the case here. It just gives you a better anchoring point and that's it. It doesn't brush off against your skin or anything like that. And then there's of course the look. I mean, you may not like the design I made, but for sure there's something that you can make using their tools to have a design that reflects your personality, your likes, your environment, depending on how you want to approach it. The power is in your hands. And as far as the overall experience, I mean, I was able to reach out to HYPR to have their inputs on the modules. They provided a video, the shipping was great. I think it's a great experience. And to keep it real, the first time that I was introduced to custom built controllers, I was like, what is this? But as time went on and I experienced firsthand the benefits that they provide, this is something I love to see with every first-party controllers in the future. Custom built solutions for the Switch too. I'm hoping that we'll see them for whatever the PS6 or Xbox Series W, I don't know, whatever these consoles are going to be called. I'm hoping that we'll continue to see those options because they really provide the latest and greatest in terms of the controller-centric tech, but you also are getting your money's worth, and this is where I believe it's 100% a great value. And so that is it, guys. Again, thank you very much for clicking and watching the video. If you have any questions, make sure to drop them in the comment box. And if you found this video insightful, consider hitting the like, and to not miss any future content, the subscribe button with the little bell to not miss any. I'm Clef. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.